Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Firstly, I would like to not apologise, because we've had a nice little break at the Bucket Lister podcast, getting ready for what is now season 3 of the podcast. So this is the first episode coming out of season 3. But it was just time, after 2 years of recording week after week, it was time to take a little break. So we're back now and we're going to continue with our weekly podcast. So if you've missed it, then we are back and you can get your dose of the Bucket Lister podcast every week again. Another reason why we took a little bit of a break was because we wanted to spend some time looking at interesting guests to invite onto the podcast that can inspire you for your adventures. And we're kicking off this week with Nadia. Hello, Nadia.
Hi, Keith. Hi, everyone.
So today's podcast is going to be chatting with Nadia about her adventures, but at the same time, and more so really, about her role within the Adventure Queens organisation. So Nadia, do you just want to give us a brief introduction to you and your background, and then what Adventure Queens is?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, first of all, got a lot to live up to there. You know, you said interesting and inspiring speakers. So hopefully people can take something from this chat today. So I'm Nadia. I am the community lead and director of Adventure Queens, which is a not-for-profit organisation that aims to smash down barriers stopping women going on outdoor adventures. So we're all about bringing women together and providing the skills and building confidence for them to get outdoors, really, and go off on more adventures that push them outside of their comfort zones.
Well, I mean, I was going on the awards you won at the National Outdoor Expo last year, where you picked up Inspiring Person of the Year. So I'm kind of hoping that you're going to be able to inspire people if you manage to pick up that award.
Hopefully,
What was your background then, Nadia, and how did you get involved in the Adventure Queens itself?
So I've always really liked the outdoors. I think it started quite young. My first ever purchase as a kid, saving up my pocket money, was for a tent. And I remember going into Millets with my 5 and 10p's in a little plastic bag. And I bought that tent and I spent the entire summer in the garden. But I never really considered myself sporty. Didn't really like PE that much, didn't really like games. So I kind of came to, I guess, more physical activity a little bit later in life. And then I moved overseas for a while. So my day job, I work in the international development sector. So I moved to Nigeria for a few years, which was a bit of an adventure in itself. But I actually found coming back was quite challenging because many of my friends were getting married, they were settling down, they were having kids, and they didn't really want to do things. And I wanted to get outdoors. I wanted to go on hikes. I wanted to go kayaking. I wanted to go camping. So that kind of set me off looking for things and looking for community groups. So I started off looking for hiking groups in particular and didn't quite find one that fit. And then I came across this excellent organisation, Adventure Queens, which had just been running for, I think, a few months at that time, maybe just under a year. And I thought, this is great. It's all about getting women outdoors. And from there, I got more and more involved. I did my first wild swimming with Adventure Queens, my first night in a bivvy bag, etc. And it just kind of got a bit, it spiraled a bit, really.
So how long have you been sort of more involved in terms of, now working as the community lead and things like this?
So I took on that role, the community lead role, about 4 years ago, which was an absolutely amazing experience. So Adventure Queens was set up in 2017 by 2 wonderful women, Anna McNuff and Emma Frampton. And then kind of a few years in, they decided to take a bit of a step back from the day-to-day running of the organisation. Anna popped out a few kids, and Emma's doing a bit of retraining. So they asked me to take on the day-to-day running of the organisation. And it's just been incredible, really, watching it grow. We've now got 15,500 members, 25 regional groups across the UK. And we're working on a range of different projects to try and support women who face additional barriers to getting outdoors as well.
And where are you seeing the trend with women in adventure? Because obviously at the Bucket List Company, we're seeing more and more solo women coming onto trips, and I think that's what's great about the Bucket List Company, because we've got people who want to go and do things, and exactly like you just said earlier, like when you came back from being away, people have got different interests. People want to get involved with things, but their friends just don't like the same things. And actually, by having organizations like yours or the Bucket List Company, where people can join onto trips and go and do things, gives these people the opportunity. But I've led some trips. I mean, I led a trip to the Sahara Desert a few years ago now, and there were 16 in the group, 15 of which were women. And there was one guy with his wife on the trip, and it was just a full trip of women. So, we're seeing it a lot more, that solo travel in women. I think women are a little bit worried about maybe going and doing these sorts of trips on their own, and actually coming away with an organization like the Bucket List Company or Adventure Queens, and them having that kind of safety net around knowing that everything's been organized, or that they're not on their own, is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we've seen when we talk to women is some of the main barriers are around confidence and around having a lack of people to get outdoors with. I should maybe clarify. So Adventure Queens, we're not a tour company. We don't have the same sort of model as the Bucket List. So what we really pitch ourselves as is we've got this community aspect. So we encourage women to meet up and share skills. And then we've also got the events that we organise, which are again very kind of light touch, mainly volunteer led. So you're not kind of signing up to a glossy pre-organised event. It's very much focused on peer learning and ensuring that people are learning from each other. So yeah, I think when we think about solo travel, one of the things that we do at Adventure Queens is try and equip women to go solo if they want to. So providing mentoring, for example, is a big thing as well. And when I think about me, when I started my solo travel as well, it definitely felt more reassuring to be booked onto a group where I knew what was going to happen, or potentially also mix it up a little bit. So I remember one of my first big trips was to Thailand, and I did a big mix. I had a few days by myself. My mum joined me for a couple of days, and then I booked onto a couple of group activities, like a cooking class, for example. And that was really great because it meant that I was able to push myself enough, some time by myself, but also had the comfort of knowing that I had other organizations that were planning things for me. There'd be people that I could talk to, people in a similar situation. And I think, yeah, we're really seeing a massive increase in the number of women that are looking to go on adventures, and maybe booking onto a group travel experience is the first step for them to do that.
Yeah, and I think, we see that more and more, where, people maybe don't want to go solo because, they want to be as part of a group. They want to, more importantly, meet like-minded people and create new relationships with people that like the same things as they do. And the one thing that we've seen is how many people book onto a trip as a solo traveler. In essence, they're on their own, but then they'll join up with people they met on that trip for their next one. And, they'll then travel with them again because they finally met someone who is like-minded, likes the same things that they do, and they get on together really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a real benefit of these types of organized trips, because that everyone there is interested in the same things, because if they weren't, they wouldn't have signed up to that trip.
Yeah, completely. I think that's the biggest thing, I think, from that we hear. Like we'll have like a WhatsApp like the week before they go, just we have a WhatsApp group, and then we'll do a Teams meeting or a Google Meet like the week before they go, and you see all these people kind of not knowing each other, very nervous. The questions are kind of what questions are going to be asked, and as you said, it does come down to a confidence thing for many. And then once they kind of meet up at the airport and they actually all meet and realize that they're all like-minded, that disappears then at that point.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you found it too, but I think one thing that's great is there's a lot more awareness that everybody's different and that lots of people do struggle with anxiety, for example. So like what we always try and do is really break down as many barriers as possible before someone comes to one of our meetups. So, that might be, as you say, setting up a WhatsApp group. It might be setting up a video call, for example, beforehand, so people can actually meet each other and meet the person that's leading the walk or leading the event, and ask any questions that they've got. And also, I think for us, what's really important is sharing, if it's a walk, for example, exactly what that walk's going to look like. What is the pace like? What is the distance? What's the terrain like? Because different people have different abilities. You might have different fitness levels, or maybe you have a health condition or a physical disability that makes it challenging to walk on certain terrains. So I think it's really amazing now that there's all these different organizations and groups that work in the outdoors that are trying to become more inclusive and trying to support a broader range of people to get outside.
Yeah, because I think, another barrier to a lot of people is cost, isn't it? Like, adventure activities can be very expensive. I run an indoor climbing center as well. We do activities, every day of the week. It's, we're recording this, it's half term, like the team are out doing activities for families in groups that are all down in Devon, and, we know what the price point is, and we know what the price point needs to be to have a sustainable business but for a lot of people, that is a barrier that they can't afford to do it.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I think it's something that we're really passionate about at Adventure Queen. So we're completely free to join. Most of our events and meetups are either free or very, very low cost. But that comes with its challenges in itself, because basically as an organization, we have to operate on a shoestring. So I've got 50 amazing volunteers that work with me, and we wouldn't be able to do it without them. But I think the reason we do what we do is we're really passionate about the power of the outdoors and the power of adventure, because it's had a big impact. For me, it's had a big impact on me. It's had a big impact on many of our volunteers. So yeah, that's why we keep all of our meetups really low cost or free. But also one thing I'm passionate about as well is trying to break down this idea that you have to have the latest kit or the best kit. And I've actually recently written a blog post about why I hate outdoor kit, because it can be so divisive. People think, oh, I can't go to this event because I don't have the latest branded, I won't mention brands, but I don't have the latest branded waterproof, or I don't have the fancy walking boots. Most of the time you don't need them. You can get by with what you have, whether it's, trainers, whether it's a CAG in a bag. I got by for years without any sort of fancy kit. And I only invested in some in the end because I was doing slightly more intense trips. So it was necessary. But yeah, I think it's really important that people just get outdoors, and try and push themselves in any way they can, and don't see money as being a barrier or too much of a barrier.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I mean, it's kind of that, we say to people all the time that, for a lot of our, we have a kit list for every one of our trips, for example, and, you look down that kit list, but actually, if you went around friends and family, you could probably, borrow most of the things that are on that kit list that you need for the trip. And we always say to people, there are two ways of buying it. You can go and buy cheap, but a 13-day Everest base camp trek, it's probably not going to last till the end of the trip. But, if you're going to be doing more and more and more of this, then, investing in kit is a good thing. But, it doesn't have to break the bank, and you don't need a £400 waterproof jacket because that's the one the person in the shops told you to buy. So, yeah, I think you're dead right there. But, cost is obviously a huge barrier to people, and it's great to hear that your events are free for people, but obviously you do need a lot of volunteers though.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is challenging because the volunteers that we work with, they've got lives, they've got jobs, they've got families, and because they're part of Adventure Queens, they've got their own hobbies as well. So they've got their own adventure trips that they like to go on. So it is challenging, but it just means that we've got like a wide range of different women involved. And I think that's what's really interesting with our volunteers. It's a real spectrum. We've got women who've done, one of them recently cycled from Glasgow to Istanbul, which is pretty epic. And then we have others that will say, actually, I'm not as adventurous as everyone else. I just do my local park run every Saturday, and I go for a walk in my local hills. And that's absolutely fine. And I think adventure is really what we make of it. And I think when we think about what we mean by adventure, it's really about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And for us at Adventure Queens, it's also about being outdoors. So I think that's what's really beautiful, is when you bring together a group of people who've got such a wide range of skills and experience and just put them together.
Yeah, we always use the phrase, there are soft adventures and there are hard adventures. And, just being in the outdoors, going for a walk is a soft adventure. Like, people think the word adventure needs to be extreme, but actually that's not always necessarily the case.
Yeah.
I think
it's good to have a mix.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we do with our trips. There are some people that don't want to go trekking for 13 days on the banks, but they want to do some adventurous things on their trip, so they might be a multi-activity week. Like, I'm heading out to Spain next week, and we'll be doing some climbing, some mountain biking, some walking, some canyoning, some via ferrata. So each day is different. Each day has a different level of adventure. But there hopefully is something in it for everybody. But in terms of your events, obviously you said there are 25 regions.
Yeah, that's right. 25 regions across the UK.
And they all organise their own individual. Do you do national events as well and bring everybody together?
Yes, we do. So we just had one a couple of weeks ago, which is our big camp out. And we did that in partnership with Alpkit, who are a great company. I'm sure you're familiar with them, and the listeners are.
Yeah, I know the Alpkit boys very well.
Yeah, so it was a lovely weekend. It was up in Lancashire, and we had glorious sunshine, which we seem to always have for Adventure Queen campouts, which is very, very lucky. But we had a mix of community walks. Alpkit led a gravel bike ride, which was really good fun. We had some workshops as well. And it was just a great weekend, really, of bringing people together. And I think what's always really fun is people come along and they don't necessarily always have all of their own kit. So like you said, they just borrow from people. So we have a community group, and people will post in it, and they'll say, I need a tent. Can I borrow a tent for the weekend? And people say, yes, I'll bring along a spare tent. And then there's always a lot of giggles when you get a tent that comes along and absolutely no one can figure out how to put it together to start with. But, eventually if you get, 4 Adventure Queens around this tent, you'll get it put up in the end. So yeah, it's really good fun, really nice weekend. So that happens every May, and then every September we have another national event, which is our Nearly Wild camp out, which is similar sort of idea, but fewer bells and whistles, really focused on getting back to basics, local walks and camping, and of course a campfire as well, because what camp out would be complete without a campfire and marshmallows the size of your face.
Exactly that. Why do you think adventure builds such a strong confidence in people?
I think once you've done something, it makes you realize that actually you're capable of so much more than you thought, and you're stronger than so much more than you thought. And that can be transferable to different parts of life. So if you climb that mountain, Kilimanjaro, for example, you didn't think you were going to be able to do it, but you trained for it, you prepared, you set your mind to it. Physically, you're able to do it. Mentally, you're able to do it. Who's to say that, if you've got that strength, that you can't apply for that job you didn't think you were going to get, or, leave that relationship that, you wanted to leave, or ask out that, cute boy at the local cafe or whatever. I think it's just, adventure has a way of pushing your comfort zones, growing your comfort zones, and really building your belief in yourself. And I think that's really important. You just have such transformational effect on people.
And have you seen, what's the most powerful transformation you've seen from somebody that's been involved with Adventure Queens?
I think there's quite a few, and some of them I won't go into detail because there's a little bit of personal information. But one of my favourite examples is one of our volunteers now. So she came to one of our big campouts a couple of years ago, and she'd never been camping without her family before. And she always tells me she was really nervous, had no idea what to expect. And she just got into paddleboarding at the time. And I remember one of the sessions that we had, we were all setting adventure goals. And she said, actually, I'd really like to do a multi-day paddleboarding trip, put my tent and my sleeping bag and everything on my paddleboard, and then paddle somewhere, sleep overnight, and then paddle back the next day. And so she set that as a goal. And then a few months later, pretty sure she met up with someone else from the Adventure Queen community, and they did that. They did a multi-day paddle trip. But that wasn't enough for her. She then decided, actually, I want to do this again, but longer and overseas. So she applied for our annual Adventure Queen grant. And so she got cash, kit, and mentoring to plan a trip in Finland to do a multi-day paddleboarding trip, which was, really amazing for her and really pushed her out of her comfort zone. And she did that, which was impressive enough as it was. And then she came back and she said, actually, I want to get into racing. So she did a paddleboarding race. And then she said, actually, that's not enough. I want to be a coach. I want to help other people do this. So she's recently qualified to be a paddle sport instructor. And she's now helping women and men as well, and children too, to get outdoors and go paddleboarding. And she's also a volunteer for us because she wants to give back to the community. And I just think that's such a lovely story, because we do see that a lot of people, once they've got that kind of taste for adventure and they've been able to benefit from it in that way, they do want to give back. And I think that's why we do have such a strong volunteer group too.
And what can someone expect then when they come to their first Adventure Queen event? So if they were to book onto something, what expectations are there?
I think it's really friendly. So we're very open, we're very supportive. And I think there's a real culture of there's no stupid questions. So if you've got a question, someone else is probably wondering the same, or someone has wondered it the same in the past. And it's really about encouraging each other. As I said before, there's a real focus on peer learning. So we really believe that everyone has something to learn, but also everyone has something to offer as well. So for me, I do long distance kayaking. I'm a kayak coach. I know a lot about kayaking. I can help people a lot in that area. But if you put me on a bike or you put me on a climbing wall, I'm like a fish out of water. So I know for me, I'm still getting value out of this community. I'm still learning. There's still people teaching me how to be more confident and how to gain skills in different areas. So I think, when you come up to your first event, it's really that supportive environment that's really important for us. And I think you'll feel that straight away. It's something that's quite special.
So what advice then would you give to someone listening who wants to get outside more but doesn't know where to start?
I would just say start where you're comfortable and ask questions. So there will be people who've been in your situation before. There'll be people who are happy to help. There'll be people to go with you if that's what you want. As I said, a couple of weeks ago, we had our big Adventure Queen camp out. There was one woman who wanted to try bivvying for the first time. So that's when you're in a little, for those of you that don't know, it's rather than being in a tent, you're basically in what looks like a waterproof sleeping bag. So it's a lot more exposed. You have excellent views of the stars. So she really wanted to try it, but she'd never done it before. So a couple of us, we said, well, what would make you feel more comfortable? What would help kind of alleviate some of your fears or some of your nerves around this? And she said, well, if you could teach me how to arrange everything, and then I'd be quite happy to be by myself in this area, and I'd be quite happy to be by my tent. So if I'm nervous, I can get out in the middle of the night and get back into my tent. So that's exactly what we did. We set up all those systems in place to make her feel confident and make her feel comfortable. And she had a great time and actually saw a shooting star. So it was a double win.
So tell us about your world record then, because you've got a world record, haven't you?
I have, yeah. So last year I set a kayaking world record. So it was me and another woman. We set the world record for kayaking the length of the navigable Thames, and it's the women's record. So essentially, for some reason, I was looking at Guinness World Records, and I noticed there were a lot of records for men, but there weren't any records for women in kayaking in this particular category. So to be honest, I thought it was going to be quite an easy win. I thought, well, if we can just paddle the Thames, whatever time we do, we're going to set a record. But unfortunately, it wasn't quite that straightforward. And Guinness actually set as a target of completing it within 24 hours. So it did kind of give us a bit of a kick up the backside to get into training and do it. So we managed to finish it last year. We did it in April and completed the trip, which was 200 kilometers in 21 hours and 33 minutes. So yes, I've got my little certificate on my wall with me now, my pride and joy.
Well, let's hope no one listening to this thinks they can go and knock you off that spot and get a quicker time. Although they're very welcome. Would you go back and try it again?
I would. I think if someone did it and broke our record, it might tempt me to go out and do it again. I think it was a really great experience. It was difficult in ways I wasn't expecting it to be, and easier in other ways than I was expecting it to be. So it was quite a learning experience overall.
And what did doing that teach you about the adventure or about life? Like, did you learn anything from that experience in itself?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this because someone actually asked me the question recently about, did it change my outlook or did it change my perspectives? I would actually say that some of the things I'd maybe done earlier in life had already created that change. And I think being part of Adventure Queens, I've got this strange mentality where I feel like anything is possible. So with the record, it felt like it was definitely possible for us. So when we did it, it wasn't a surprise, or I wasn't kind of amazed, because I always knew that we could do it. I always knew that we were capable of doing it. We had the mental strength, we had the physical fitness and the physical training that we needed to have. But I think what I found quite interesting about it is when you say you've got a record, people are like, ooh, that's impressive. But we don't have a record because we're the fastest kayakers. There are many women kayakers in the UK at the moment who are much, much faster than us. But we were the ones that saw an opportunity and thought, well, let's give it a go. And I think that was the big thing for me, is actually sometimes you don't have to be the fastest, you don't have to be the best, just be the ones that are willing to give it a go.
And in terms of obviously 21 hours of paddling, you need to be fit to do that. How much, like I always say to people when climbing a mountain, it's 60% mental, 40% physical. Like it's mind over matter for most of it. Was that the same with this kayaking challenge for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd done some long distance things previously. So I'd done a 100-kilometer walk from London to Brighton, and I'd done a few summits like Kilimanjaro, Tubkal. So I kind of knew physically what I was going to struggle with. I knew I was probably going to feel sick at some point. I knew I was going to, start to have aches and pains at some point. But absolutely, it's the mental side of things, just knowing that you have to keep going. And I think I'd say that as much about the training and the preparation as I would about the actual event itself, is just, having the focus and having the determination to just wake up. For us, it was kind of 6 mornings a week and train and get the hours in the boat and get the training, get the strength training done. I think, yeah, absolutely the mental side is really important. But I'd say with that as well is when you're thinking about your physical training, that also links back to the mental side of things, because when we were preparing, everyone had an opinion about what sort of training we needed to do. And I remember someone saying, oh, you don't need to do more than a 3-hour paddle. You don't need to do any more than 3 hours paddling to prepare for that. And I knew I would not feel confident doing, what could have been up to 24 hours worth of paddling if the longest I'd done was 3 hours. So I just had to say, thank you very much for that advice. I think to feel comfortable, I need to do more than that. And that's what we did. And we came up with a plan that we were both confident with, and that we thought would set ourselves up for success rather than open us for potential injuries or things happen 8 hours into a paddle that don't happen 2 or 3 hours in. So I think for us, that was really important. We were both confident with our training plans.
You mentioned about the lady who applied for the grant. How do the grants work within Adventure Queens?
So each year we have 3 spots. So we open in October and close end of November, and then we make our announcements of who's won the grant in January. And essentially what we're looking for is we're looking to support 3 women that are applying to go on a life-changing, human-powered adventure. And it can be, and those adventures can vary quite a lot. As I said, it's about pushing you out of your comfort zone, and what is one woman's comfort zone is quite different from another. So those adventures can vary quite a lot. So we've had all sorts. We've had women that have done long distance cycling. We've had multi-day paddleboarding trips. We've had someone that did a rollerblading trip, for example. And we've had fast packing trips. And what we look for in applications is this something which is human powered? Is it something that is pushing you out of your comfort zone? Is it something that's feasible? So we also look at what have you done before, and what what training and preparation are you looking to do for this? And does it fit in with our timings as well? Because we like the adventures to take place between March and October the following year. So those are the sorts of things that we look for. And our annual grant is supported by various sponsors. So we're in the process of securing this year's sponsors. If any companies are listening and are interested in partnering with us, we are open to cash and kit donations. But yeah, we provide cash, kit and mentoring to each of our 3 winners. And the idea is it takes some of the financial burden off them when it comes to kind of planning and getting all the kit they need for their adventure. But the mentoring is really key as well, because I think what we find when I call the winners each year is their first reaction is, oh gosh, now I've got to do it. And there's this real sense of slight terror, because I think that's the best sort of adventure. If it's really exciting, but you're also slightly terrified, then you know it's going to be a really kind of impactful adventure. So having that mentoring, that support network, I think is really, really important as well. It's, we match winners with mentors who've done similar adventures before, so they can provide advice on route planning, packing, what kit to wear, but also just cheerleading too, just saying, look, I believe in you, you can do this, and having that encouragement in place, I think is really important.
Excellent. And that's open to any members of Adventure Queens to apply for?
It's open to anyone who identifies as a woman and is over 18. So you don't even have to be part of the Adventure Queen community to apply.
Okay. And how do people, if people are listening and think this sounds like an amazing organisation, I want to be part of that, how do people get involved with Adventure Queens?
So if you have a look at our website, so it's adventurequeens.co.uk, there's a list of different ways you can get involved. One of the key things is to sign up to our newsletter. So that's where you'll get information about upcoming events. You'll get information about when the grant is opened and other opportunities as well. There's also information on our website about how to join your local group. So I mentioned before about these 25 regional groups. And you can also follow us on social media. We're Adventure Queens UK on Instagram. And you can also read our blog post as well. And so there's basically lots of ways that you can get involved, and it kind of varies according to where you are in your adventure journey at the moment.
And I think the biggest piece of advice to people is just to get involved, I suppose. There is no financial commitment to it. You can just pop along to one of the local events and try it, see if it's for you, see if it's like-minded people that you want to be around. But the key thing is just to try, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you actually aren't looking for people to go off and do things with, you're just looking for tips and inspiration to do things by yourself or with your families or with your own friends, that's absolutely fine, because our mission is really just about to get more women outdoors and having adventures, and how you do it is completely up to you.
Nadia, the final question that I ask any new guests that comes onto the Bucket Lister podcast is, what is left on Nadia's bucket list?
Oh, I've actually got a really long bucket list. I previously had it stored on a website somewhere, and then the website went bust. So I was very frustrated because I had about 120 items on this bucket list. But I guess maybe just to highlight a couple. So one of them is the Devizes to Westminster kayak race. It's a 120-mile race through the night. It's been going for over 50 years now, maybe even longer. So I'd really love to do that. I'd really like to do a swim packing adventure as well. So the idea of swimming somewhere, setting up camp in my little bivvy, and then swimming somewhere the next day. There's lots of countries that I'd like to visit as well. So I've been quite fortunate to be able to travel quite a lot with my day job. And actually, I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier today about your trip to Uganda. So that has piqued my interest. Uganda is a place I'd love to visit, and particularly to see the gorillas. So
my favourite trip.
They're just a couple of things on my list.
Yeah, oh, nice. Get that one right up to the top. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Nadia, thanks ever so much for coming on. In the show notes, we'll put links to the website so you can find out how to get involved. And again, hope you found this interesting. Hope you think that you might want to get involved in the Adventure Queens, for any of you women listening to this podcast. But hopefully for you men as well, you found this episode interesting and you can take some inspiration from it as well. Nadia, thanks again. And I'll be back next week with another episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. But until then, thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.